Hello, this is John Mount from WinVector LLC, a San Francisco-based data science research consulting and training firm. In this video, I want to do a quick beginner's review of PyCharm for Anaconda from JetBrains. PyCharm is an integrated development environment for Python with some extensions for Anaconda and scientific work. On the left here, we see a file browser, and in particular, we see a project I've been working on, WinVector's vtreat package for Python. And here we have some examples, and this is an IPython or Jupyter notebook. And again, the PyCharm comes in an open source free version, and then it comes in a commercial or pay version, which includes the extensions for scientific and for Jupyter work. So I'm reviewing the pay version. So here we have our Jupyter notebook presented as a bunch of blocks, and each block is identified with its type, the default type being a Python cell, and then other types being raw, and then in between the blocks we can put in free text. We can run all of the blocks in this Jupyter notebook by pressing the run all command. That has started up a Jupyter notebook server, and it has started to execute all the cells. Now, as a side effect of all the cells being executed, we have in our Python environment various data structures. For instance, this is the prepared data frame. And we can also view that, if we have the commercial version, as a data frame, which brings up this little viewer over here. We can also take a look at the details of the workbook. We can have side-by-side input and output windows, or we can view that workbook with the output inline against the cells. And we have data and graphs being presented. We can also turn off that view for a cleaner view. Some other things we can do is we can ask where a function is defined by pressing F3. So this is the Seaborn line plot, Seaborn being a very popular and powerful Python plotting system. And the interesting thing is we got into here by just clicking on F3, and we can also find where that file is by a hover. So you see this is in our environment AI Academy, which is an environment I've been teaching from lately, and this is the actual Python file. Because we have access to the actual file, we can actually set a breakpoint in there, and when we redebug the cell, we have access to the source code and state of this system, even though it's a system library we included. So this is really neat that we can debug pretty much into anything. Just aborting that out, dismiss that window. Here I am editing one of the Python files that implements the vtreat system. The IDE is actually quite powerful. For instance, if we introduce this problem here, we have this annotation system on the side that shows us problems. So here it says that this line of code violates the PEP 8 recommendations that there should be white space around operators. So we can either run these down and fix them by hand, or we could use an annotator tool all at once to fix them as we just did, or we could use an external tool such as Black to reformat the entire file. Now obviously this thing finds problems beyond just formatting, including wrong variable names, attempting to set a member variable on a class when that member variable had not been set during the constructor. A lot of really fun bugs it finds. This is basically, it prefers underbarred words that have that are in the spelling dictionary. So this is a little warning it's giving us, which we're ignoring. And then it's sort of a pleasure when we actually get to a file that scores up as completely clean against the inspector, which is, there's a lot of things it's doing, and we can turn off various warnings to get that. Here's a clean one. This star is a nice little Python notation that says these later arguments must be bound by name when used, which I think cuts down confusion quite a lot. So we've got a single step debugger. We've got a basic object inspector that we can look at objects raw. Then this is the VT transform, so we can see all the fields on it. And then for more complicated structures that have a data frame-like thing, we can also view in the data frame browser. And we also have, as we'd expect from a full-featured IDE, fairly extensive refactoring abilities. So we could change the method signature and basically add a new argument, z, and then defaults to 1, use default value in the signature, refactor, and yes, see it added the z here. Now notice that refactoring not only introduced the argument here, but it also introduced it in the derived class, and would also introduce it to any function that the IDE knows about that is using that. So that's the nice thing about refactoring. It's not just changing one copy of the signature, it's changing the definitional copies of the signature and the uses, which is really, once you get used to refactoring, you hate to move away from it. Now some other things I've been learning as I learn this IDE is you want to set your external libraries and environments, and you also need to eventually configure that with Jupyter, that it's using the same channel. And I believe earlier on in this we saw a warning that this channel does not match that channel, so I need to look for that control. Most of them can be found on preferences. For instance, on the PyCharm preferences, the preferences for the project interpreter are here. Another thing to watch out for when starting with PyCharm is it does a very deep inspection of every Python object installed in every environment you tell it about. So that indexing can take quite a while, but it's really worth it. It's what gives us all sorts of online help and auto-completion. Because it scans all the files, we get very powerful auto-completion, mostly easy to access from objects. For instance, D is a pandas data frame. And if we pause here, we get up very quickly the auto-completion menu. And that menu is very responsive, so it's actually quite fast to use. Basically, it doesn't interfere with my typing at all. Very easy to accept its suggestions and completions. Or you can just type right through it and it doesn't steal your focus. Really fun auto-completion. And again, you see that the system is automatically annotating in here what it knows about the instantiated variables that we're working with. And that's my mini beginner's review of PyCharm with the Anaconda and scientific extension. Just like to emphasize that we received nothing to do this review, we have no contact with JetBrains, and we've actually paid for this copy of the IDE, even though it is available in a free 30-day trial format. Thank you very much for your time.